Zoom recording. I will wait for the go ahead that we're live on Facebook, Tom, before I get going. I can share my screen now.
Started, but I'm not hearing anything.
Not hearing anything. I had someone said they're not hearing anything. We can hear you. We're going live shortly. We are not live yet.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
I can hear you now.
Okay, I believe we're live on Facebook. Just going to meet everyone whilst we get started with our introduction video. I'm trying to figure out the Facebook thing. Okay, Tom, I can help with that actually. So if you just go on the more, and then I believe we have to go to.
Gender is a pre-written book, and the plot is boring. Daughter, girlfriend, mother, wife, rip out the pages, staple them to your back, and start soaring. Pretty, quiet, weak. They will try to describe you with such things, but you will use their stereotypes and turn them into your wings. When you choose to challenge, gender is a pre-written book, but not all the girls' stories end the same way. 33,000 girls are forced to become child brides every day. 132 million girls are not in school, and their futures are balloons that they watch drift away. But you are the full stop to the story. You are the new sentence that takes it on a different road. When you speak up, you open your palms and you share the load. When you choose to challenge, gender is a pre-written book, but not all of the characters are included, like the First Nations women who stand as still as statues, always walk past but never acknowledged or seen, or migrant women whose culture stands like a skyscraper, and they're forced to burn down the parts of themselves society doesn't deem convenient, or refugee women who are treated with brutality when we should have been lenient. And you are there as this story unfolds, and you are faced with a choice. So choose to challenge. Gender is a pre-written book, and this is your chance to add your own chapter, to call out racism and sexism, and use courage to rub it out, to stand where the rest of the world has chosen to sit, to call it out at home, at work, at school, bit by bit, to scream that the world has chosen to whisper, not just for your daughter, your mother, or your sister. Let us choose to challenge. Gender is a pre-written book, and if you're listening to this, and your actions are the pen, you are not the impression of the past. I believe that you are so much greater, stronger, kinder. Choose to create history, not to be created by it. choose to challenge.
Okay, hello, good afternoon, and welcome everyone onto this afternoon's panel discussion on this year's International Women's Day theme, Choose to Challenge. When I first came across the spoken word, it was really powerful. You know, some of the issues that she very beautifully put across and the various challenges as we, as women or girls and women, have to face based on the pre-written book, as was said in there. So the whole theme of this year, the word we're trying to get out there is choose to challenge, especially if you're in a position where you can speak up and have a voice for other girls and young women. Let's choose to challenge. So in line of that, we have an excellent panelist with us this afternoon just to discuss exactly this, specifically in the women career and STEM space as to the various challenges that we come across, perhaps how we've dealt with it in the past, how it's helped shape our current situation, and what we are still doing in our various roles and the various circles and sectors that we find ourselves in to contribute towards challenging the status quo of traditional norms that most women and girls are still facing today. So we have with us, still have people joining the waiting room. So quick introduction of our panelists, and we've all met ourselves already. So this will be brief, not too much in detail, but everyone on this call today has a lot of value and experience to bring to their discussions. And so as and when we go around the table to hear their opinions and the various questions, I think the best thing would be for you to just say a brief 2 or 3 lines about yourself, and then we can jump into the questions that we will be discussing. We're keeping an eye on the chat room and via Facebook Live as well. I know we were not live a few minutes ago. I'm not sure if we are right now, but we will carry on anyway. So first question that we're going to start off with is basically, I'm asking, do you have a moment? Do you remember any moment at all where you thought something had to change? Did you come across an experience personally that you know, you get that sinking feeling in your stomach and you feel this is not right, something has to change, something has to do about it? And if you've ever come across an experience like that, what did you do, or what are you still doing about it? Okay, so I just share my first personal experience. So we hear a lot about, you know, these gender challenges and issues facing women, and sometimes it's quite easy to be removed from those situations if you're not experiencing it personally yourself. So personally, I have 3 brothers and then dad who's late now, and mom. So I'm only used to hanging out around boys. Some might say you're spoiled. I'm not at all. But so in my immediate household, I never really experienced any discrimination at all for being female. If anything at all, you know, everyone champions, you know, my progress. And my mom always says I have 4 boys and 4 girls, so an equal household. However, my first real experience was during my PhD when I was pregnant with my daughter. And basically, when I had my first daughter, I was in industry, and so I didn't really have the issues that I faced when I had a child as a PhD student, only to then realize that your funding, okay, you're being funded for a PhD, and then if you have to go on maternity leave, your funding is put on hold. With the funding being put on hold, the university at the time, as part of the rules and regulations, also says that you can't be off your program for more than 6 months. And so that then meant that, well, if you do want to take maternity and you do want time off before delivery, all of that has to fit within a 6-month window or you're off the course, right? And then your funding is stopped as well. Never mind, you need childcare, you can't take your child to the lab with you. And for those in the UK, universities have this charter they call Athena's One, and that is something that they signed to say they have a vested interest in supporting women career, women progression, and it just seemed to me that it was a tick box exercise. It is one of the top 5 universities in the UK, and it was a real shocking moment for me when this happened. So without going into much detail, as we go around the conversations and questions come about, I can delve into that more. So I'll go around the panelists just by who's on my screen first. So Dr. Araba, you are first on my list. So just a recap of the question that we're going around to answer is, do you have a moment where you thought something had to change, and how did it make you feel, and what did you do about it, or what are you doing about it?
1 second. Yes. Hefty, thank you very much for that question. So about 3-4 years ago, whenever I have to talk about it, I get a bit emotional. So I was in Ghana for a project meeting. So I was working on a project as a research associate, and then we were in Ghana for like 3 weeks. I had my daughter, who was 3 years at that time, and then I got back, and I was supposed to travel for a conference in Argentina. So when I got back, my daughter was unwell. So I had to cancel the conference. So I went and I told, my line manager was fine, Professor Michelle Holsworth, God bless her. She's always been supportive. But this, the finance officer told me I had to re-question whether I could do this job, I could do my research if I have to cancel a conference because my daughter was sick. I around that time, I had sacrificed so much, all those travels. I mean, if you're working on an international project, you do a lot of traveling, There were times that my line manager, who has always been supportive, would tell me to take a break because I was sending emails, sending reports at dawn and things like that. So I knew how hard I was working, So when they had to question whether, research was for me because I was canceling a conference, I cried. I told my line manager about it, and I was actually told that they were considering deducting that the cost of the ticket from my salary. My line manager had to stand in and say she was going to resign if that was going to go ahead. And that is how, that case just died, But whenever I cast my mind back, I'm like, so what if I didn't have that supportive line manager? Did I have to be penalized because I canceled the conference, because of a sick child?
Yeah.
That is the example I can share. I have another one, but I'll let others also come in. And these are some of the things that I think should be challenged. We shouldn't have to choose between taking care of our children and going for conferences or meetings. We need to do something about some of these situations.
Wow, well, thanks for sharing that. That is, yes, I'm not sure what to say to that, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who find themselves in similar situations. And it just reminds me actually about a professor from another university who had written an article about how female scientists in the lab just cry and fall in love with their supervisors, and similar along the lines of, should we really be, pushing and encouraging and getting all these female scientists in the lab. But yes, I'm going to come to you, Lois. You're next on their panel list. So again, just a recap of the question.
Okay.
Is there any that moment where you thought something had to change because of a personal experience that you had for being female, and how it made you feel, if what you did about it, if you've done what you are still doing about it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Hefsey, for the question. But I don't think what I had to go through to make me change was because I was female. It was just because I was coming from a place where, like, I studied, did my master's as well in University of Ghana. And because I'm in the engineering field, I've had to analyze a lot of data where I've not had personal experience with that machine, or had to run the machine on my own. So I came into a place when I had to do another extension. It was like Erasmus project where you had to do it in Ghana and both in the UK. I came here, and obviously I had published papers in that aspect. So everybody is thinking that you might know how to use the equipment, right? So I got in, and literally I was put by one of the machines, and completely I had no idea about it. Everybody left me in that. I contacted people to help me and all that. And one person just said, you know what? This equipment is not even going to come, you're never going to get this equipment in your country, so there's no point learning it. And at first I couldn't process it, but later when I sat down to process, I thought that no, this was racist. This was a racist comment. Like, you cannot say that. And there was, I mean, a lot of meeting sitting where they had to decide whether I was fit for the place, I was right for the place, because my publications and other things showed that I had a background in that, but I wasn't. And you can imagine the late night sleeping times, having to learn about setting equipment, having to do them after school hours, just because I wanted to keep abreast of time. So I think that I was just moving from a practical session that was coming from a theoretical background to a practical session where you had to use the equipment by yourself. And so it had to involve a lot of hard work, a lot of late night sleeping, a lot of letting people go. I think mostly my social life, just to be able to get around that. And I think it has paid off. Yeah.
That's interesting. So rather than being inducted on how to use an equipment, or someone just taking time out to say, you know what, it's super simple, I'll make time and we can go through it, rather than conclusion was, you're an Erasmus student from Ghana, it's not an equipment your country is ever going to get anyway, so why bother myself supporting you with this machine anyway? Right. Wow, how powerful is that? Lakeisha, we're going to come over to you now. So I know you work with girls a lot, based on your and your charity. So it'd be interesting, again, similar question, if there was that one moment that you thought something has to change and this is what I'm going to do about it, or I'm still doing about it.
Yeah, I quite early on in my career at this point. I only finished university about 3 years ago. So I sort of started the working life since then. And I think it's almost a bit of a positive trait to say that I can't really pick and point a series of different events that have happened whereby I have felt inadequate or unequipped for my job because of the imposition and the opinions of other people. And for me, that is a sign of the fact that things are changing. I think if it was the same case 10 years ago, 5 years ago even, I think it would have been very different. But I mean, one event that I could actually think about was last year I was invited by a friend for a science policy review in the House of Commons. And it was a series of different female scientists there, different politicians. And I remember speaking to someone who was like the head of nursing for something. I can't even remember exactly what she was, but she was someone that I remember looking at the invitation list and thinking I'd love to be able to speak to her. She looks like she's done some amazing things. And she looked at me and she was like, you look a bit young to be here. And I thought, well, I am. I was still a student at that point. And I told her about the work that I do, and she kind of gave a bit of a laugh at the title Girls in Science. And for me, that was my first experience of having someone degrade the experience that I was having with my team and with the whole social enterprise that I run. And it was just quite a disappointment that it wasn't a man, and it wasn't anyone I expected it to be. It was a respected female scientist. That being said, that is the only time I've ever had kind of a negative experience with something like that. But I think that all of us need to be able to challenge not just the big actions that we take, like some of the examples you saw before about the remark about, the equipment not being of use in Africa sort of thing. Like, that's quite a big statement, but, just sort of the smirks and the double looks and things, I think they're all things that we can sort of subconsciously do to each other, and maybe other people can do to us, but it's worth kind of bringing those experiences up and challenging them and making sure that we don't do anything ourselves, or if we see someone doing it to someone else, that we pick it up and don't decide it's slide.
Great, that is so true. There's so much that we can do to peer support, other females in our sectors as well, to pull everyone up together. It's going to lead us straight into A4, because you as well, you spent quite a few years working with a lot of young girls, mostly through the African Science Academy. And so I'm sure you probably had a lot of stories about the background of some of these girls. And so we're interested to hear your perspective on the topic that we're discussing at the moment.
Thanks, Hefty. Yeah, I think for me, I think similar to Lakeisha, it's been the smaller things. I think I've been on a journey, and as I grow on that journey, I tend to observe more things. So my first instance, or a particular period that I noticed that there was differences, was when I was at sixth form. So I went to a girls' secondary school in the UK, and in my secondary school, I was in top set science, top set maths. You know, it was just a thing. We were all girls, and we could all do sports, and we could all do science. We could do whatever we wanted. And then I went to a mixed sixth form, and all of a sudden, it wasn't cool to be, you know, top maths student or to be top science student, because that was the domain of the boys. You know, we were to play netball or, you know, do some other subjects that girls do. And so that's when I noticed something's a bit odd. And, you know, all of a sudden I wasn't in girls' school. You could be in top science and be in a popular crew. All of a sudden, you know, girls doing science are just not cool. So that was one of the first times I observed it. Going on, looking in my life, looking at those around me, if I think about colleagues I've worked with, and they talk about some of the examples they've had being in STEM and being a woman, they've also mentioned that there are things that need to be changed. I remember one particular student who told me about her internship. She's doing computer science, and she was on an internship with some other boys, and there was a task to fix the mainframe or do something underneath the machine. And she was given the task of typing in their line manager's office, whereas the boys were supposed to get under the machines and get dirty and so on. And she didn't understand why. So she had to kind of double track and do her task really quickly, and then try to go and help the boys. And eventually her line manager was able to see that she was the best person for the role, whether under the mainframe or, you know, at the desk. She was just that much better. I don't always think that it's a case of better and worse, but I do think that sometimes there are subtle things in society that we definitely need to challenge, and we definitely need to look at how can we change this and how can we make it more balanced for women and men. Yeah, so that's my addition.
Great, thank you so much. Lots to share over there. And I'm going to lead straight into Dr. Aurelia. And so I know you also have quite a strong voice when it comes to women and gender issues. So it'll be interesting to hear your take on the subject. And then perhaps we'll take some questions from the audience and then move on to the next.
Thank you very much, Angela. And like the others before me have shared, I mean, these are the majority of the experiences are the kinds that I personally identify with, the kind that you share about the challenge on your PhD. I had both my children when I was studying for my PhD, and I just couldn't take a break, although I wanted to. And it was a particularly frustrating, very, very stressful time for me. And I think it was Araba who shared about having a supportive line manager. And I would say that in that time, that was one of the things that made a difference for me. My director of studies, interestingly at the time, was male, but I think he almost knew, or would I say, he was very much aware of gender dynamics. And so he'd say to me, is everything okay? If you're having a challenge, let me know, so on and so forth. You can take a break. It won't be on paper, but if you need a week, 2 weeks, a month, let me know, I'll make it happen. Now I backtrack to before I started that PhD. I had a PhD interview with another university, one of the big ones, like Angela had shared, one of the big ones. And on the interview panel, my director of studies, or my would-be director of studies, was female. The assistant supervisor that was female as well. And so we'd had what I thought was a really productive PhD interview. And just before it would end, the director of studies, the lady says to me, "Oh, I noticed that you're married and that you're just married." And it was true. I think I was just about 2-3 months into marriage then. And then I said, "Yes, that's true, I am." And in fact, I said it with so much excitement because I thought, oh, she'd taken an interest, in me personally. And then she goes on to ask, "Okay, so how soon do you plan on having children? And have you thought about how having children would disrupt your PhD journey?" And I thought, actually, no, I hadn't thought about how soon I'd be having children. I don't think it will disrupt my studies, but if it does, so be it. And as I think back, it wasn't after that interview that I sat down and I processed and I thought, what the hell? She's actually policing my womb to be able to check whether I was good enough, right? Not as a candidate or as a human being, but by virtue of the fact that I possessed a womb that was capable of pausing whether my career path or affecting my productivity, so to speak. And so I share this experience to say that everything that we have shared, it is quite common. And sometimes there's a tendency for us to think that, oh, this is probably just happened to me and I'm like a one-off case. It really isn't. You'll be quite surprised at the number of career women who have similar experiences. And just for the sake of context, I know our time is short, but allow me to share this one because it happened less than a month ago. So I'm in the university and we are planning a seminar, right? A day seminar. And so I'm coordinating people from different parts of Ghana. And there's this really lovely gentleman that I speak to every once in a while to check logistics and other stuff. And every time I'd call him, he'd answer and say, "Yes, dear." He'd respond, and I want to believe it's a Ghana thing, right? Because when I was in the UK, it never happened, but it just grates me the wrong way. Anyway, so each time, "Yes, dear, yes, dear," and I just brush it off. But this incident was almost the last straw that broke the camel's back. So they finally arrive on campus. I'm in my boss's office, and then he calls and I say to him, and he says, "Oh, I'm outside your building." And I say to him, "Okay, I'm talking to my boss. I'm coming out in a minute to see you." The next thing he says, "Oh, you can't come alone. You need two people to come. I can help you come." I couldn't make this up if I tried. Now, I'm sure if I was white or if I was a cartoon, I'd have smoke coming out of both ears and I'd be red in the face. I was that furious. Anyway, so I just thought to myself, "Ochibia, calm down, calm down." Calm down, he doesn't know any better. So I go out to meet him, I thought to myself, I need to correct this. I need to challenge this kind of behavior. So fast forward, lunch break, I see him standing with a group of friends and I say his name. I say, "Oh, can I have a word with you?" And so he comes over and he says, "Oh, yes, dear, what's up? Lovely, whatever. And I say to him, I really did not like the way that he spoke to me and has addressed me in the past. If you're unsure about how to address me, always go by the way I address myself or I address myself in emails to you. And I always address myself, regards Aurelia. So I'm quite happy for you to call me Aurelia. You haven't met me before. So you need to be able to draw the line, determine when to act professionally and otherwise. So this is coming from one professional person to another. You can't address ladies by dear. You can't say it's inappropriate. It's rude. And there is nowhere that is appropriate for you to make such a sexual innuendo "Oh, madam, I'm very sorry, you know, I was just joking." I said, "Yes, my point exactly. It's only a joke if we are both laughing. If I feel offended by it, it's not a joke. It was very rude. It was very insulting. Please don't do that again." He apologized, and then we went off and we went to have lunch. And so, like one of the ladies before me shared, for me, I think it's in the micro expressions, the things like, "Oh yes, dear, oh, this one, she's my wife. Oh, did you bring wache to the office today? Did you cook for me?" Or the national service personnel around, and we are looking for someone to make us a cup of tea. Is always the woman. I'm going to be quiet here.
At this stage, she's very passionate about this subject, and so it's always interesting really to hear your take when these conversations come up. I should also at this point give a shout out to all the male champions of females out there. I know as well personally, my supervisor was amazing. So I didn't actually. It was a super stressful time at PhD, gosh, because of this pregnancy, and I didn't actually tell even my colleagues until probably about 7-8 months. And so, thank goodness, I'm fairly small-ish. And so it was every morning trying to find the right clothes so you're not showing in itself was such a nightmare. But when I did eventually, get to the point you can't really hide your pregnancy anymore. And I didn't have to speak to my supervisor. He was quite upset because he said, "I really wish you told me earlier because there's a lot more could have done to support you." But it was my first year. I had worked so hard to get into UCL, and I thought, I'm not going to lose this opportunity, whatever I need to do to stay on this program. And it was just feeling of, if someone found out I was pregnant in my first year, I could lose the opportunity. And worst of all, when you speak to students at first and they say, "Oh, your funding is going to be put on hold, you can't have more than 6 months of etc., etc." But my supervisor was super supportive, and he said to me, so I decided to just take 3 months off. And he's like, "No, you're not going to focus when you get back. Just have the whole 6 months, so you're ready to return." And it was never an issue. I had super flexibility throughout my whole studies, and so I thought I would shout out all the super supportive men out there championing women. And also interesting what Lakeisha shared. So again, in having these conversations, I think it's we must also mention that it's not a case of like the men versus women, because there are a lot of ladies out there who are not supportive of ladies who want to pursue a career and almost look down on you in a certain way just because you have chosen to take a certain path. Okay, so we're choosing to challenge gender stereotypes across board, whatever situations that they may be in. The next question, let me go into the chat box actually. Did anyone have anything they wanted to add on to the first point we've just been discussing? So we just started off by sharing our own personal experiences, those moments where we've had this feeling where you thought, this is not right, I need to do something about this, something has to change. And for me, what I think in my case needs to change, which I did publish an article about my experience about the whole issue of, we want to have a lot of female professors. To become a female professor, you need to have a PhD. A lot of people are not embarking on a PhD probably until their late 20s or 30s. It's around the same time that most people are possibly looking to get married and start families, and there's so many hindering blocks in our way. So are you just, on a tick box exercise to say, we have the Untitled Charter, and, we are promote gender equality, but then practically when it comes down to it, there's no support at all. And if that is the case, we don't need your Untitled Charter. So things like that, I believe, at least in my case, are areas that we're looking to challenge. So just head over the chat box briefly and see if anyone has got anything to add to that. Okay, I may have lost my chat box. Any of my admin people on the call to manage the chat? Okay, to the panelists, a message from Agnes Lingi, right? What do you think about affirmative action or positive discrimination where in schools girls are being given lower standards to encourage female participation?
Yes, so there is a...
Yes, I got it, Tom, thank you. to encourage female participation, and can that cause others thinking girls are not enough or smart enough? Interesting question there, Agnes. Actually leads into the second topic that we had, and it's basically, do we need more women-specific scholarship programs in STEM? Okay, so it's a case of yes, we do, no, we don't, and what is your reason as to whether you think we do need more or not? So I think I'm going to start off answering this question in line with what Agnes has asked as well to Lois, because I know you run a lot of support for scholarship programs. I know it's not female centered, but then you work with both male and female from the scholarship coaching program that you do offer. So if I come to you first for this question, recap on the question being, do we need more women-specific scholarship programs, specifically in the STEM space or in other sectors altogether that perhaps we don't have a lot of women in there? So positive discrimination.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Hefsi. I think with this few scholarship journey, I started just about a year ago. Before I started this scholarship journey, I actually didn't think it was a right place to actually specify that females only can apply for that particular scholarship, because just like everyone was thinking, why should there be a scope where just females should actually apply for it? I believe that you can competitively going for any scholarship, and you, as far as your credentials meet that entry requirement, then you should get your way through. But in moving forward, having to talk to other ladies, just like we all say, between the ages of 20 to 30, that's when people are settling down. So I've had a conversation with a lot of females that do not think that they want to take up a PhD position, or are skeptical to do that after having a family, or even before that. Within that window period, then they are not going to take it, because it's going to serve as a hindrance. And I use myself as an opportunity that having a supportive person will obviously push you to actually do the PhD and do it well. Then having to read certain reports from, SDG4, then it cast my mind back. We had a project where we had to take it in the Hafo region of Ghana, considering the University of Energy and Natural Resources, and most of the females expressed that family inquired them, mostly the females, to settle down before moving to higher education. So there's not much education in that aspect, where family, who form major stakeholders of moving on in your life, are not being informed well. So the female girls end up halting their education right after undergraduate studies and not moving any further. Then I realized that the SDG4, I'm a very strong SDG4 member. I was saying that they want to expand higher education scholarships for developing countries, mainly to focus on gender disparity. And females should be encouraged, because at a certain point, if parents are not able to afford school fees, they will rather choose to educate the man as compared to the woman. So over the years, these things have crept in, and has led to a certain age capping for which scholarships should be given to. So I think that a lot of narratives has gone around, and females have had to drop down at certain points, not because they cannot do it, but because major stakeholders in their lives are not being supportive for them to achieve that goal. And I also experienced that greatly, and I had to challenge that with self-motivation to be actually able to do a PhD, coming from a home where I'm a first generation PhD holder. So I think that if giving that opportunity to females, not because they cannot do it, but because there has been a narrative that has ended up capping the level of girls in terms of moving higher on the educational pedestal, then it's a right motive if they should set out those scholarship programs.
Great, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to come over to you, Dr. Araba. Is there a place for positive discrimination, particularly when it comes to female empowerment? And should we be encouraging and promoting more women-specific, female-specific scholarship programs, or even if we take it to the workplace, there might be certain jobs advertised where it specifically say we prefer a lot more female candidates to apply. Is there a need for positive discrimination? Is this something we should be discouraging, or should we be saying, a level playing field, whoever with let the best person win? Is Dr. Araba still with us? And she had her little boy on her back earlier on. Okay, I'm going to come to you, Lakeisha. Okay, just 1 second. Right, we'll come back to you, Dr. Araba. Lakeisha, what's your take on the topic? Do you think there's a place for women-specific scholarship programs or women-specific job openings? Or is that basically say you're not competent enough for the role, but then we want a female, so we'll put you there anyway? And what is the long-term impact of that?
Yeah, I think there definitely is a place for them, but only short term. I don't think in the next 10 or 15 years we should be having scholarships specifically catered to females, because I think the problem should be better then, hopefully. I do understand, and I know of many people that have greatly benefited from scholarship schemes, bursaries, various forms of funds that have kind of narrowed down the spectrum in terms of people that can apply. And I think that if you want to have specific demographics within a workforce, within a university or a company, then you should consider that. However, there is that whole thing of like double standards. Statistics show that females attain just as well as males do on so many different levels. Statistics shows that when females are assertive and have confidence and training, that they're perfectly able to achieve the same results, and actually, especially towards the end of secondary school, it's even higher. So I think maybe it's more of a surface face value thing that you could have going there if a scholarship was what you wanted to pursue, because just in terms of stats, it's not that females are less clever than males, obviously, that's never the case. But I think that females knowing that the pool has been narrowed down gives them that confidence. And if that's the step that it needs to be in order for that to benefit their lives, then that's okay. But I don't think it should be a long-term value. I think the problem should be resolved in the next 10 to 15 years, hopefully sooner. But I'm glad that they're taking place. We work at Girls in Science with a lot of different universities that are tailoring specific programs to girls or wanting to make funding streams available.
Yeah, great. Okay, so there's a need for it, but only in the short term, and not so much should be a long-term strategy. If I think we'd have some more insight to share on this topic specifically based on your experience from the African Science Academy. So I know, is it all you girls are there on scholarships? Is that correct? Maybe for the benefit of the audience who may not be aware of what the ASA do, and I know you are moving on from the ASA, or you have already, might be, if you just give us a brief overview as to what they're trying to achieve, what they are doing, and if you probably do agree that it's a case for, girl-specific scholarship programs.
Okay, thank you. See, yes, I do have to shout out to all the SA girls, SA alum who are on this call. I've seen quite a few of them. It's really good to see them supporting. Yeah, so let me tell you a bit about ASA. So ASA, for which Tom, your brother, is on the Ghana board for, is a school in Ghana which believes in having a pan-African solution to, Africa's development. So it targets girls from all over Africa who are interested in STEM, and it's mainly the physical sciences rather than the biological. And we kind of work with those girls, try and empower them, give them skills, and try and give them opportunities to achieve scholarships so that they can go on to university empowered, but also changing the narrative and contributing to the outstanding problems that still remain in STEM that women haven't been able to add their voice to. So that's a bit about ASA. Answering your question, and Agnes's question as well, whether I believe scholarships should be given to girls and whether there should be a lowering of standards in order to give girls the opportunity. I fully agree. I definitely think that we're not dealing with a level playing field at the moment. There has been hundreds of years of patriarchy. And if you look in STEM and you look at the scientists that you remember the names for, we're talking about Einstein, Newton, Boyle, whoever else it might be, it's all men. It's actually a lot of European men as well. And there's a lot of undoing that we have to undo if we're going to kind of, I suppose, make our mark as women of color, whatever it might be. We have to get to a point where we can contribute on the same level. Now, ASA gives scholarships to its students, and we've had girls from all over Africa who come to us and they've done WASSIs or they've done whatever qualifications they've got. But in the 1 year that they've been with us, a lot of them have been able to get the best A-level marks in the country, beating boys, beating girls in maths and further maths. And so I think that once girls are given the opportunity and there is equity rather than equality, okay, we then give them a chance to achieve certain things. And once they're able to achieve certain things, then there can be battles. I'm not saying that girls are gonna overtake everything, even with if I talk about the prizes for the top A-level results in the country, 1 year it was ASA girls, the next year it was a boy from Christian High, the year after it was an ASA girl, so it continues. It's a battle. I'm not saying that girls have to be given a head start and dominate all the time, but we have to get to a point where there is equity, where we are being given an appropriate chance to challenge the status quo. And right now, because of patriarchy, we are way behind. There's socialization when we're young girls and we're with our families, the ideas that are put into our heads, the social norms and so on. Those are all the things that need to be addressed and need to be tackled. And so that's why I think that more support needs to be given to girls currently until we get to a point where we're in balance.
I was nodding so much whilst you're sharing that. I totally 100% agree. And I see Helen on the call as well. Helen, lovely to have you on here, who was also quite instrumental to the ASA. I fell in love with that program for the first time. I heard about the ASA launching. Great initiative. And I should also say, just in conversations with, other females in science, that there is a case of having women-only programs or institutions or classrooms, just because, just statistically, once you throw men into the dynamics of a group of women or girls, or boys into the dynamics of girls, the whole dynamics in that, I'm going to use a classroom analogy right now, the whole dynamics does change, and you see a lot of the girls taking a step back once the males in the room. So 100%, I do believe there's a need to have women together being challenging themselves in a space, and we're not saying we don't want to interact with the men, but yes, 100% I would agree with that. If I come over to Dr. Aurelia just to share your thoughts on the subject as well.
Thank you, Angela. Yes, I'd say definitely there is the need for female-specific scholarship. And almost to answer, I believe it was Agnes who asked the question. One of the things that I was doing before COVID was volunteering for, excuse me, a female network. And what I did on there was to teach or to help the young ladies to identify scholarship opportunities and to apply for them. And after and this wasn't STEM specific scholarships, just scholarships generally. And after one of the sessions, one of the young ladies came up to me, and she did seem quite concerned and was asking, well, why is it that we need gender specific scholarships? I mean, I talked about regional scholarships, I talked about subject specific scholarships, and all the different types of scholarships that there were, but she was particularly concerned about the gender-based one, right? And that, well, she's got a brother, and wouldn't that mean that her brother is almost left behind? And so this is how I explained it to her. I said, you have a brother at home. After school, you get back home, and mommy is cooking in the kitchen. Who is more likely to be in the kitchen with mommy? She says, I am. When you're in the kitchen with mommy, what's your brother doing? Oh, well, he's probably doing his homework. Do you also bring homework home? She says, well, yes, I do. After dinner or lunch or whatever, who's more likely to do the dishes? She says, my mom and I. Who wakes up in the morning to sweep the compound? She says, well, I do. And I said, think about it this way. Gender-specific scholarships or gender for females are almost a way, like Ifwa has shared, right, to try and almost level the playing field between males and females. Because every human being has got 24 hours in the day. But here's the reality of it. Domestic work, or should I say the chores that are done at home, largely remain things that are gender specific. So whereas her brother would have, let's say, 6 hours to focus on his homework, to study for an exam, so on and so forth. Let me call this girl Amma. Amma will probably have 2 hours out of the 6 because she's got to sweep, she's got to iron for daddy and mommy, and do so many other things. Genders, and this is how I explain it to my students. Gender-specific scholarships, this is what they are saying. Girls are brilliant too, but we don't see their brilliance shine through simply because they don't have the same hours to work as their male counterparts would. And so we are saying this is to bolster the female applicants, right? Let's say we are looking for a progressive society where everyone is operating at a capacity of, say, 10, right? The males are already at 5 and females are at, let's say, 3. To say that we are going to, quote unquote, scrap gender-specific scholarships, right, and give scholarships, make scholarships open to all, is to give privilege to an unequal society. And what that does is that it exacerbates the existing inequalities. Because if I have 3 and you want to bring me up to 10, you'd have to give me an extra 8. If there's a male who has got 5 and you want to bring him up to 10, you just need to give him 5. And that is almost the focus or the idea behind gender-based scholarships. And one thing that I always add is, it's not enough to just give or offer gender-specific scholarships. A lot of these things, like Ifwa has shared, comes from years of socialization in a very patriarchal society where there's a lot of gendered, religious, cultural norms. When I was younger, I wish that I knew that my voice and my space was valid. And like Angela has shared, I see this in the classroom a lot. Most of my vocal students are male. Now, it is only when they submit their scripts that I realize she's never said a word in class and she submitted this, right? But then for some reason, they don't realize how awesome they are until we almost prop them up or give them that kind of encouragement. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for sharing that. And just on the note that you ended on, I think one of the things that I would really love to see a lot more of is just programs for girls, just based on, confidence and self-esteem and belief in self. And it's something that I suffered with myself personally for years until I went through not a mentoring program. I had a mentor and she threw certain questions back at me and you start questioning yourself. You're thinking, actually, why am I more comfortable in this space than that space? Because suddenly you find yourself in environments where you feel you're being judged. And so you will take a step back in order not to, I suppose, shine bright or show off the awesomeness that you have to share. And I think it's something that a lot of young girls internalize very early on. And there's a need for programs like that. There's an interesting question in the chat box about what do you think about the constant rise in the number of women in STEM organizations? It's like, yes, every time we go online now, there's another STEM organization for women or girls. popping up. But I'm going to throw this back to the panelists. And the first person would have to be Lakeisha, because she runs Girls in Science. And I think this is a really good question, actually. So over to you. What do you think about the constant rise in the number of women in STEM organizations?
That's great. And there is one point I want to touch on from what was mentioned before, but this is a great question. I agree. You know, it's funny because when I started Girls in Science, I was in my second year of university and I had no clue that there was anything like that existed. I literally remember sitting on my bed and thinking, this is an amazing idea. Why has no one ever done it before? It took me about 10 seconds on Google to realize I had not come up with this amazing idea for the first time. But I think that's the beauty of it, because what we want to do is create pockets of society in multiple places that tackle the issue within their social circles or in their communities. I think if we had one centralized huge organization, it would miss out some of the grassroots key fundamental aspects that perhaps people are having in specific places. So I know personally, when I started it, I was studying at York, so up north in the UK, and it was just a very different culture to where I am now. I'm in Buckinghamshire, so I'm down south a couple, like 3 or 4 hours away from where I was. And the difference of personalities, the difference of engagement in people that were partaking with us, the different inconsistency from universities was just so different. And even the mixture of schools, and I mean, this kind of relates to a bit of social inequality. I remember when we hosted one of our first events there, the engagement we got from private schools was just so different to the engagement we got from public schools and just main schools. So I think that like it's almost like each to their own, and the thing is we're all working towards the same mission. So I always tell friends who want to start a business, it's like, you know, if someone said, oh, there's a fish and chip shop 20 minutes away, I can't open up one here, then we just wouldn't have the culture that we have in the UK anyway. I think it's important to address where you are, and then also understand that you have your own story and your own narrative in this that different people can relate to compared to another organization. So people find their place. And the variety of stories that you get from multiple organizations is really good. Another point I just want to quickly touch on, I think it was Aurelia earlier, I'm not too sure. She was talking about the difference between like boys and girls when they're at home. And I can completely relate. I'm an only child, so I can't completely relate, but I think that's one of the problems, and that's one of the issues. Why is it that girls, when they come home, have to help with the cooking, cleaning, laundry, and the guys just sit down and watch TV or do their homework? Maybe it's sort of like different cultural norms or different, like you said, like upbringing and patriarchy and everything. But it's another thing to sort of challenge the ladies in this room, many of which I know are mothers, that you need to create that equality from home, because then you can't complain when the boys grow up and they don't really know how to cook a couple of dishes like what they like. There needs to be equality there. And I think that kind of extends to the outside world as well, because I know personally, my mum was very, and still is, people say she's not a typical sort of like African mum, in the sense that like I wasn't really in the kitchen quite a lot growing up. I was doing my homework, I was working. And I mean, you can always learn how to cook, but those years doing your GCSEs and such, like, you're not always going to have them there. So I think it's just a question that we need to just consider ourselves and understand that I really want to make sure that our girls are one leg up in society, that their thing needs to be done, and that mums at home need to play their part as well, and just making that available for them.
Yes, excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Lois, if we'll come to you, yeah, I think you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think I'll comment on the constant rise in the number of women in STEM. I think that representation matters a lot. And I remember growing up watching TV, I never really saw a female engineer being popped up on TV where you could actually see that, oh, you could be like that one. So until very recently, about 3 years ago, where a pilot, a pilot engineer came on TV, which is one of the Ghanaian television stations, and my mom called me and said that, oh, she is a pilot. She is a female pilot. and she works as an engineer on the field. So you could be like, hey, can't your course do something in that line? So I saw that so many years of this journey, my mom or anyone around me hasn't called me to actually say that I've seen a female engineer. You say you do something in engineering, does it have a tally around that field? So I think that when more of these events, more of these organizations pop up, people are able to find the community where they can easily relate to, and obviously sharing pains. Because like when you hear someone's story about like the way Dr. Hefsi spoke about being pregnant, I could find myself in that field. Now, what should I do? What measures should I do to put myself in this place to be able to really adjust in such a society? And having these communities of women in STEM organizations where you can talk real life issues and things that happen that women can only understand will help in the like formation of representations, as well as having mentors as well. I have people coming to me asking me very, very simple questions who are already doing a PhD, maybe in something like how to find concentration, because they've ultimately like forgotten, but they can lean on me to actually think that, okay, if they are able to depend on me to speak on something like that, I wouldn't go about to say that, oh, why can't you remember this? You learned this back in school, like that kind of thing, because we can easily and confidently confide in ourselves with issues that we best understand. So I think that the rise of this women in STEM organization, Black communities, Caucasians, I mean, different tribes brings a lot of representations where our parents and people that are around us could help influence such a decision for other young ones to venture into.
That's great. Wonderful points there. And just to again add on to what Lakeisha had shared, we're all demographically in different places. And even if you take your normal borough that you're in, so I'm based in Essex, but you've got Basildon and you've got Brentwood and Benfleet, and there's so many areas. So let's say we had a Girls in Science program in Basildon. Someone has to commute probably another 45 minutes to an hour to be part of that program. So why not have your own version where you are and collectively we're just spreading the same message? So probably there's not enough of it, but yeah, great question. I do see why you're asking that question. There seems to be a lot of women in science programs sprouting all over the place, but really it's perhaps because we're now more conscious, we're seeing these a lot more as well. Interesting comment from Robert in the chat box saying the language also needs to change. So attaching females to a profession to qualify it's a female. So we say a female doctor, a female pilot, and why can we just say it's a doctor? When you see this doctor and this doctor is female, make it seem like it's quite special that we have a female doctor. Does anyone have anything to say? I think,
yeah.
well,
Yeah, I have something to say. I think I saw something about the UN was by Prof. Sarah Gilbert. She's one of the leading scientists who helped in the Oxford COVID-19 vaccine. She said the statement that stuck with me a lot. She said, I'm not a woman scientist. I'm a scientist, and more than half of my colleagues are women, and we do the job. And that's where it ends. Like, don't qualify it to make us feel much more accepted because we are doing something extraordinary, that kind of thing. I think that it brings a lot of issues. So I agree with the person 100%. Yeah.
Cool. Does anyone have anything to share on that subject before we move on to the next topic, which will be very interested? Language matters. Lots of Keisha there for a minute. Ifá, do you have anything to share on that subject at all before we move on to the next?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with Robert's point about language matters. I think, again, it goes to that idea of sometimes women, there's a really good book I read recently called Invisible Women. And it talks about the fact that the assumption is that everything is about a man, and often like a white man, a European man. So unless you, like, if you want to quantify something, you have to say, oh, this is a Black something, or this is a female something. And so it's very interesting that the idea of language is being brought up, because definitely we are often invisible women, and it's assumed that a human being is a man until you qualify it and put the woman in front of it.
So we are changing the language, and the point in parenting is also important. You have a great part to play in changing the narrative as mothers, making the change at home will translate into the wider society. Excellent
Please,
point.
Hesty,
Yeah.
I do have a point. I do want to add on to that point about parenting. I think this one is quite controversial, and sometimes we assume that it's mothers who are not doing their role, and it's very easy often to point fingers. And especially I keep saying we have to understand that we're in this big patriarchal system, right? And ultimately, power lies with men and kind of the father figures of our society. And so even if there was an experiment, there was a book written by Bell's Hook, it was talking about understanding patriarchy. And there was an experiment in her book where a father had decided to raise his son gender neutral. So he was allowing his son to play with toys and dolls and cook and do whatever he wanted to do. But what happened is when he got to an age where he was going to school and his school friends came home, they were laughing at him for playing with dolls, and they were laughing at him for doing girly things. So even though in your own home, you may want to put certain standards, certain qualities in place, we live in society. You can't live in this bubble. So you may want your girls to be strong or your boys to be feminists or whatever, but we live in a bigger society. And when they get out into school, if they're not doing what is accepted by society, eventually you'll see that the effect of you as a parent becomes very narrowed.
Interesting point. Actually, we're fighting, challenging status quo beyond the little bubbles that we live in our households. And there's an interesting comment I came across, maybe LinkedIn or Twitter, and someone was asking the question, who is preparing our boys of today for all the women we're empowering for tomorrow? And I thought that was a very powerful question. Okay, so I'll just I'm paraphrasing from what I remember because it really stayed with me. And the question was, who is preparing our boys of today for all these women we're empowering for tomorrow? Going back to, again, this patriarchal system that has been created over years, and then suddenly we're telling all these young girls that, you can be this too, you can do that too, and empower yourself and be whatever you want to be. But then they're still going to end up forming relations and working in the same environment as these young boys that are also being brought up and are also going to be part of this same system. How are they being, if reconditioned is almost the word to use, how are they being prepared or reconditioned or being, I suppose, mentored in a way as to say, there's equity, there's equality, you're not in danger as some people are starting to feel a bit threatened, which is one of the questions we had on, as to in collectively choosing to challenge the status quo, is there a legitimate fear that we risk a future where men are disempowered? Okay, so that will lead straight on to that. I'm going to come to Dr. Araba first for this question. I know your little boy was distracting you a little bit there. So if I come to you for this question first, I just take it again. We're saying, so first from that comment that I came across as to who's preparing the young boys of today for the women we're empowering for tomorrow, and specifically in collectively choosing to challenge the status quo, is there a legitimate fear that we risk a future where men are now disempowered?
Is there that fear?
That's how you get. That's a powerful, packed question, right? Yes, yes.
Let me tackle the first part first. So who is preparing the young boys? I think that was it Aurelia, the person who spoke just before me, mentioned something about parents. I think we all have a role to play. It should start from the high level. Just like she rightly said, when we are at home, why do we leave certain jobs just for girls and make it look like the girls are supposed to take care of all the chores, whilst the guys, the boys sit in the living room and watch television? So that's right for the household level, making sure that the children understand that everyone has a role to play. Girls shouldn't always be kept in the kitchen whilst the guys are always learning. That is where it starts from. But when we come to the society or to organizations, I think we need to change a lot. There needs to be structural changes, institutional changes. And I'll give you some examples. Like when you're a researcher or an academic, your outputs, your main outputs are your publications, going for conferences and things like that. But then when you have young children, for most of us who are having families and young children, you wouldn't be able to go for conferences, all the time because of childcare responsibilities. But at the end of the day, you are assessed equally, aren't we? We all have to publish. We all have to go for conferences. Okay. When we come to meetings, most of the times our meeting times are at around 9 a.m. in the mornings. If you have to do child drop off or pick up around 3 in the afternoon, say here in the UK, what happens to that? You're always late, or you're not able to make it for such meetings because you have childcare responsibilities. Okay, so these are some of the things. It's a collective responsibility. It starts from the mothers, the fathers, it starts from the household. It needs to, and when it comes to the society, okay, let me come to that as well. A lot of the times we say that we don't have a lot of women leaders in positions, okay? But even when women are placed in these positions, are we ready to accept these women leaders? I worked in an institution not too long ago, and there was one of my line managers who faced a lot of challenges just because she was a woman. And this is not, Africa, this is just here. Just because she was a woman, there was a lot, she was stressed, and I saw exactly how the same staff members behaved when it was a man, because she had to go off stress, sick for 1 year because of stress. And when she was away, there was someone who was acting, and I saw how this man was treated differently. Okay, so everyone has a role to play. We need institutional changes. We need societal and cultural changes. We need to start from home. I think when we start from there, then this can trickle down to all the other levels, institutional, organizational levels. That's what.
Great, thanks for sharing that. I'm actually going to bring a gentleman on here. This is not, as I said earlier, it's not male or female affair. We're all being asked to challenge the status quo, regardless of what gender you might be, whatever place you find yourself. So I'm going to bring on Robert. I should declare Robert is my brother. I'm bringing him on because he's a huge champion for men owning, I suppose, the roles in the home. And he actually published a book called The Husband Paradox, which talks about it's really because it's a patriarchal society, men need to take the leading role of empowering women, basically. So I'm going to bring Robert on just to share your thoughts on this subject. Is there a men feeling threatened that we're empowering too many women of the future? And again, who is preparing the young boys of today for all the empowered women we are grooming to be in positions of tomorrow? Is Robert still with us? Yes, he is. Cool.
Right, yeah. Thank you, Angie. Thank you all again. So, are men feeling threatened? No. However, I think one of the things, and sharing from a man's perspective, that maybe I'll hopefully get you to understand, is that we do live in a patriarchal society. And who benefits from the patriarchy? Men, we do. And so if I'm benefiting from an inequality, unless something drastic happens, I'm not going to do a lot to try and change it. And so, for example, my earlier comment around the women as mothers in the home, it's not so much as pointing a finger as saying you have a huge opportunity to make the change from how you're bringing up or how you're helping bring up your children. Because unfortunately, in the part of society where that we live, largely women are seen as the primary caregivers. And so I use the example of my mom. We have 4 children, and my mom used to make this statement that she has 4 boys, she has 4 girls. And so she was one of, I guess, a few of her generation where there wasn't any gender-specific role at home. We were doing both. And I narrate an experience in the book that Angie mentions where one of her friends came in and I hadn't done my chores. And, I was being given a telling off. And her friend said, oh, why was she asking me to do it? This was to clean a bathroom. Why was she asking me to do it when Angie was around? Angie should do it. And when my mom started going like, no, she was like, well, she wouldn't allow her sons to do the kind of work when their daughters are around. And that's kind of the point. That it's not so much blaming women for not raising their sons well, but you have an opportunity to change the narrative at home so that yes, although your sons or your daughters may face that pushback outside, if you're all doing it and you're supporting each other in doing it, it begins to change the narrative. The other thing is, for example, work. I mean, a lot of men will push back and say, if the woman is the boss at work, she's this, she's that, she's aggressive, she's this. And it's fine for men to say that because, again, men are the benefits of patriarchy. However, when I hear that coming from women as well, I find that quite interesting because I won't push another man under the bus. And so even if the woman is doing a horrible job, well, men do horrible jobs as well and they get away with it. So support the women to keep doing horrible jobs, even if they're doing it in a horrible way. It shouldn't be one rule for one and one rule for the other. And so the point being that you have a good opportunity at starting from home to begin to change the narrative, because there are very few men who will come out right and say, yes, we are benefiting from patriarchy. They benefit from it, and so we're not going to do much to change it. And if we're supposed to be 50-50 in terms of population, etc., you have as much opportunity to be able to do that. So yeah, I'll end it here.
Right, thanks for sharing that. Well, Robert is not feeling threatened. For other men on the call, it'll be interesting to hear your points on this. I won't assume genders. Are there any men on the call who would like to say something on the matter? Are you feeling threatened about women empowerment?
Angie, can I just add, or is someone speaking?
Not yet.
I just wanted to add to what Robert said. I think that sometimes religion and culture also kind of confuses us, you know. So for most people, religion says that the man is the head of the family. You know, for most of us, I'm Muslim, that's what we say. I'm sure most Christians also say that. And so it becomes very difficult for people to really draw the line, you know. So yeah, then the man is the head of the family, and then they start putting that in the child's head, the male child's head once the child is young, and then the child feels like, you know, I have an upper hand, and then the woman or the girl is a second-class citizen because I have to take care of the child, I have to, you know, pay the bills, and so the child just has to, a girl has to just do the household chores. So I feel like our religious leaders, our community leaders also have a role to play, because I know that Islam doesn't say women should be treated as second-class citizens, you know. So we need more education from that angle as well. You know, people need to be educated and explained. You know, there has to be better explanation as to what those clauses in our Qurans and Bibles actually mean. You know, I know that it only says that men and women have different roles and functional differences. Obviously, a man cannot breastfeed a child, but it doesn't mean that, you know, the woman should do all the household chores whilst the man sits down and then just relaxes because he is the one supposed to pay the bills in the house. Because what we know now is that women are paying bills as well. We contribute to the house as well. Okay, so yeah, our leaders also have a big role to play in this fight.
Thanks for sharing that. Choose to challenge the status quo. Anyone in leadership position, male or female, we all have a role to play in the future that we're trying to create for the generation of today and the ones to come. So last two final questions before we round up, actually. Lots of interesting comments in the chat box as well. So final two, so we're saying we have an all-female panelist on this discussion, okay? So knowing what you know now, all the experiences that you've gone through right now, what advice will you give to your younger self in terms of, again, based on what you know today, what you've been through today? If you had to go back to perhaps, let's take an age between 8 and 13. Okay, what advice would you give to your younger self? Because I think those ages are quite crucial in terms of the self-esteem and self-perception and the confidence that a young girl starts forming about herself. And then we will finally end on the question as in, do you believe that there would ever be the point where the job is done? You know, we wouldn't have to keep celebrating International Women's Day to say, let's challenge the status quo. Both sexes are going to be enjoying the same rights and privileges, and there'll be no more need, you know, for all this hard work that we're putting in just so we can give everyone an equal opportunity. So just go around to all the panelists for this one and just take it one at a time. So Lois, I'll start with you. You probably, I don't know if it's you or Lakeisha, the youngest on the panel, but if you had to go back 10, 15 years to your younger self, based on your experiences and what you know today, what advice would you be giving your younger self?
I don't think I have any regrets or anything that I would want to change, because a lot of people that know me know that I actively have a social life and actively also learn. So there was always a balance in what I do, because I grew up in a single parenting home, and I was offered a lot of opportunities to learn and make my own mistakes and pick back all the breadcrumbs that I left on the pathway. And I think that was one thing that I'll give my mom credit for, because she never really influenced a lot of decisions that we had to make. She also very much instilled the fact that we are all equally doing the job, even though I had brothers. And I remember my mom always making me fix the light bulbs at home. And I think that going to someone's house and experiencing that they have to fix the light bulbs at home, I confidently just took a table to fix the light bulb at home. And they still said, oh, that's not a woman's job. The guy is by the corner, he'll come and fix it. So I think that beautifully from 8 to 13, I actively indulge myself in every bit of my life, and I live free and fairly. So it made me enjoy myself a lot. And so I wouldn't advise, I took a lot of opportunities, if I had to, random ones that spited my mom a lot. And all of them yielded at the end of the day. It was worth it. And so she saw that, oh, eventually, if I leave her to take her own chances, then she makes her own mistakes, learns from it, and moves forward. And I think that as to whether we are going to get to a point where all these things will be equal, I should presume that the UN had an agenda by 2030 that these things should come at par. So obviously, if we are making any progress at all, by a 5%, 10% is still progress. And I always say that we are not trying to say that we are trying to defeat the men. We are just saying that there's a lot of room in the sky, and a percentage is a ratio expressed as 100. So if the total number is supposed to increase, then if you're expressing the percentage, it will come to 50-50 par, where all the total number of people there, woman and male, is almost at par. Not to say that men drop out of your role, let the women take over. We are all climbing there and adding to the narrative, so that the 20% that's allocated to women will now jump onto a 30%, 40% until we reach that point. So I think that information is going around. This kind of conversations are also helping to change the narrative, make people informed. Obviously, when people are informed, transformation will happen. It might not be as fast as we expect it to be, but we are hoping that there'll be a point in time when these things will be our part. We weren't where we were. Yeah, we weren't where we were some years ago. So obviously, yeah.
We're making progress. 2030 seems ambitious though. So you and your SDGs, good luck with 2030. Lakeisha, what do you have to say about this point? So again, if you have to go 10, 15 years back to your younger self, based on the experiences that you've had today, what advice would you give to your younger self? And again, do you believe that we're ever going to come to the point where we no longer have to actively, be having these conversations?
Yeah, so 15 years ago, I was about 9. So I'm thinking, I don't know, I think there's a real value in innocence. There's a real value in not seeing color, not being too worried about whether they're girls or boys, and just not having to worry about all that kind of stuff. And it's now that I think back to, I don't know, when I was at secondary school, I was one of 2 Black girls out of 300 pupils in my year. There were 7 Black students out of 1,200 people in my entire school. And I didn't even bat an eye about it. I never even thought about it as something that was a problem, because it's just what it was. And I think that it's kind of embracing the fact that you don't know so much. I think that's something that I should have appreciated more, until you get into the big wide world and you realize that, that might bring some issues, and that might make you feel a certain type of way. And, when you're at that age, you don't think of anything. my life's quote is write your plans in pencil and give God the pen and the eraser. And I think that is something I would have really highlighted to myself. I think you have lots of plans of what you'd like to do, but ultimately God knows exactly what is best for you. I know that personally I wanted to study medicine, and I was in my second year into my first science degree, and I was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And it took a real sort of turning point in my life to be okay with putting aside my initial plans and delving into something better that suited me personally. I wouldn't do medicine now if someone paid me to. So, but at that time, that's not how I felt. And then, sorry, what was the second question? It was
if we would ever come to the point where we no longer have to be actively having conversations about women empowerment and equality, and then it'll just be a level playing field all across board.
Yeah, I think there is great value in celebrating women and their achievements at any point, whether we are 50-50 or not. I do feel bad that, you know, we don't necessarily always celebrate Men's International Day as much as we, but I mean, that's just a gender difference. I mean, if you just think about, and this is an entirely new conversation, but just think about the way men express themselves and how they feel appreciated, it's going to be different. So I think it's worth celebrating women, but I do hope, and I do think, and I do agree with 2030. I mean, you look at the ideologies of Gen Z and young millennials at this point, and it's just completely different to the years before. So I mean, Gen Z, that's about 1995 to about 2012. And they've grown up during the whole Black Lives Matter thing and the Kamala Harris thing and the reality star becoming the president thing, and you know, so they've really seen the world evolve in social political ways more than we've seen for a very long time. So I do think that once they get into the stages where they're in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, where they're making decisions at law firms, at corporate levels, in STEM industries, that it will make a difference. And I do think that there will be a difference there.
Cool, excellent. Thanks for that good point. If I come to Ifrat, please, same two subjects, topics again. Your younger self between 9 to 15. If I love Gen Z, you know, they are growing up in an amazing world, and the ones to come after them, perhaps we are going to get there. And then, yeah, the second question being, do you think there would ever be a point where, you know, that there'll be no need for having these conversations and it will just be the norm?
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to answer your second question first. I don't believe there's ever going to be a point where we stop having these conversations, because I think life is transient. It keeps on changing, it keeps on moving. If we talk about race, like currently, we're talking about racism and the fact that the lighter your skin, the more privilege you have. I think there'll come a time where Asia is moving now. So maybe it might not be racism as we know it now, but in a different form or something else going on. And I think the same for gender and sexism. I think that we're going to get to a point where it's going to be a different discussion, but the discussion will always continue because we are all human, we are all unique, we are all very different. So I feel that this conversation will just keep happening, just like race conversations have been happening for hundreds of years. For the second question, if I was speaking to my younger self, I would say, I think you have to see things as looking at the glass. Is the glass half full or half empty? And definitely taking the glass is half full. You have something. Even if you don't have all, you have something. So make the most of what you have and kind of let this opportunity be the very best it can be. So when initiatives like this are coming up, like Choose to Challenge, what does it mean? You know, question everything. You can, you know, do as much as you possibly can. Seize the moment, live now, because you never know, another COVID or another something might come and you're not able to do what you really want to do. So seize the moment, the glass is half full, choose to challenge.
Excellent. Live now. Looks like Lois did a good job of that in her younger stage. Why not? Why not? I do see the questions in the chat box. We'll take questions once we finish all these final discussions. Aurelia, I'm going to come to you next. Again, yeah, same two questions. Advice for your younger self based on your experiences today. And again, are we ever going to come to the end of these conversations?
I'd say that growing up, I had a really, really positive experience. So I've always been a very, a very assertive, very extrovert young lady. I suppose if there's the one thing that I'll tell my younger self is to not worry too much about being a lady. You know, I'd often laugh and people say, oh, you're laughing too loud. A lady doesn't laugh like that. To be perfectly honest, I wish I had laughed louder and harder, right? And I say that I almost acknowledge my privilege because I was surrounded by such strong women, right, who were doing well in their respective fields. So that almost gave me that confidence, right, to be able to be myself. But then in all of that, they also wanted me to be a lady. And in fact, one of my aunties would tell me, oh, I have to take you to finishing school, right? You have to prim and proper and all of that. And that wasn't me. To answer the second question, will the job ever get done? To be perfectly honest, I think that is very idealistic, and simply for the reasons that Afua shared, because society is progressive, right? In the 1920s, it was a suffragettes movement, right? To get women to be able to vote. It's almost the same conversation, but the dynamics have changed. Now women are able to vote, but then it's almost certain spheres of life that women are finding challenging, and hence we want to challenge that status quo, right? In 1957, for Ghana, it was challenging colonization. Right now, we are not talking about challenging colonization. We are talking about challenging other things that, that stare us in the face as a country. And in 1833, it was about slavery. Now it's no longer a conversation about slavery. Yes, we are still having that conversation, like Afua said, about the rights of Black men, especially in the USA. So I don't ever think that we'll get to a point where we won't be having this conversation. We'll keep having it. It's just that the face of the conversation will change, because unfortunately, people almost look at the dynamics or between male and female as let me put it this way, we almost approach female empowerment as if you like, a bowl of jollof or a glass of club beer, right? If a woman, if it's a plate of jollof, if I give Afua some, then there'll be less for me, right? But it isn't that way. Actually, empowerment and challenging the status quo, it's such that the more that we each have, the better and the more progressive society will become. And so unless we almost change the way that we look at empowerment and things like rights and so on and so forth, we're always going to have that reductionist view of it, that if you have some, then I'm going to have less. So I'm going to hold on to the patriarchy, or I'm going to hold on to all the things that subjugate you, so on and so forth. But the conversation will change. We'll keep having it. And hopefully, the more we have it, the more aware others will become, both male and female, and we can get there quicker. Thank you.
Thank you. And okay, you have talked about your younger self. Dr. Rabba, I think you are our last panelist to share your thoughts on that.
Yes, I'll answer the second one first, and I'll just add to what Aurelia said. I mean, even if we get to that point where it's 50-50, I think it's still important we have these conversations, or we just celebrate ourselves, just to remind ourselves of the struggle and the sacrifices others have made for us to get to this point. Just like what we are seeing with the Black lives, slavery started when, also ended when, so many years ago, but we still talk about this. So it's very important that we still talk about it or celebrate it, even if we get to that point. And just to add to that, what we are saying is, well, to men and to other people who think that when we have these conversations, we want to take over, women want to take control. That is not what we are saying. We just want a seat on the table. We want our voices heard. That's what we are saying. We are not saying that we definitely need men. We need to work together. We want to collaborate. That is what we are asking. Okay, and to the first question, like most of the panelists have said, I also grew in a very positive environment. You know, I had supportive parents. My father was, if anything at all, maybe discrimination against the boys, because, you know, he really pushed us a lot. And so if there was anything I had to tell myself, I'm struggling, because I think that the environment in which I grew and then the people I had around me have impacted me a lot. And I feel like I'm a very assertive person, very confident person. And so really, well, maybe even though I wouldn't engage in conversations like this, maybe because I felt I was okay, which was a bit selfish on my part. So if I had to go back, even as young as I was, maybe just voice out some of these things that I saw. Okay, but apart from that, yeah, it's now that I think I can do more. So if there was anything I couldn't do at that point, now I feel like I have a voice. And so I'm trying not to keep quiet, trying to question a lot of things and trying to encourage a lot of young girls who find themselves in these kinds of situations to come out of that, you know, to be positive.
Great, thanks for sharing that. I'll open up the chat box. I mean, the microphones for anyone who wants to ask a question or share whilst reading some of the comments. I mean, we've touched on so much in about an hour and a half about how language needs to change, the pronouns we attach into certain professions. There's a good point made actually about mentoring, that it seems to be a decline in mentorship programs. And I would actually agree and say perhaps there's an element of truth to that. I'm not quite sure what it is. I know it's not on the discussions that we're going to have today, but I feel perhaps people are not as open and willing to mentor those who are coming behind them as they were in the past, whether it's because we're living more in our silos, or it's just a busy society these days and people feel they haven't got the time to commit to mentoring programs. So I don't know if anyone wants to add anything on to that. I was looking for that comment, just going through the chat box.
I'm not sure about that. I thought there were much more programs these days for mentoring. I think there are a lot, yeah,
Okay. So
there's a lot of mentoring programs out there. There are so many programs for girls, for STEM, you know. I think there's more now than before. When I was growing up, I didn't see a lot of mentoring programs out there. Yeah, there's a lot.
It was Dr. Bakari actually, maybe. Yes, maybe you can share. It also says, I also think that mentoring is gradually going into extinction. This is a serious point of call for all. So Dr. Bakari, I'm not sure if he's still on the call and if he wanted to elaborate on that comment a bit more.
I think that it's even more structured now. There's a lot of mentoring program out there, and it's even more structured than before.
There are. So at Girls in Science, we run one of these mentoring programs, and I think we're seeing a lot of interest specifically from the top down rather than the bottom up. So I do understand what you mean by the decline, but we have seen a lot of interest of people actually wanting to reach out and help. I think one of the things we've noticed with that is you make the introductions, and I think it's up to the two people in terms of how structured they want their mentorship to be. What I have seen is a decline in mentoring structured programs, but what I have seen is an increase in organic relationships. So I think that social media has made it very easy for girls coming up in their career to communicate quite effectively with people that they aspire to be, or for people that are in the fields of their interest. However, sometimes one of the things we've noticed is that by putting in a structured program and saying every 2 weeks, this is the questions you have to ask and this is what you want to do, it kind of decreases the amount of engagement that we have, especially from the bottom up. So it's almost two things happening at the same time. And one of the things we speak about to our community, people that are doing similar things to us, is to kind of embrace that sort of organic relationship thing. So one of the things we're working at Girls in Science is kind of creating an array of people that girls can pick from. And sometimes mentorship is a bit more distant than what it might be perceived to be. Sometimes they don't have to meet up. Sometimes they just have to listen to a podcast from the person or watch a video of the person or see what they're tweeting about and what where their mind is and kind of aspire to be that. So I think that it's, yeah, as I said, there's definitely a challenge with that, but I kind of think that it needs to be highlighted that mentorship doesn't have to look as structured as perhaps some might perceive it to be.
Okay, so more a decline in structured mentoring, or how effective structured mentoring programs work, as opposed to we see more of an increase in the organic type relationships because of social media. I do actually stalk a lot of people online. You know, I find that a lot of positive females.
It's a great use of time.
Yes, are doing amazing things. I like to stalk them and be like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Let me stalk you, see what I can learn. So yes, sure, you can be mentored through podcasting.
Literally last week I reached out to a lady called Kavita Oberoi from The Secret Millionaire. I remember watching her on TV when I was 8 years old, and she's one of the people that kind of inspired me to study chemistry. I'd never spoken to her in my life. I tagged her in one of our posts, and suddenly we had this conversation going, and I think it just makes people so much more accessible. Just the fact that everyone is behind their phones on these Twitter accounts, I think is what girls need to realize, that they can communicate with people that perhaps they may have been able to before.
Great point. Makafui had a comment earlier, more of a question, and anyone who can answer this, please feel free to. She says, well, I think you're making good points about the society we are living and how it contributes into gender contribution, but what about self-defense? And to clarify the question, she's asking, how do you think women should react when they find themselves in discriminative situations? And so I'm not really shared a personal experience that just happened a few weeks ago earlier on the call. So did you have something to share on this? So specifically the question is asking, how do you think women should react when they find themselves in discriminative situations? Anyone who wants to take this?
Right. Sorry, I'll go for it. No, that's all right.
So, well, I was just going to say there's a lot of organizations are working on this. So there's Athena Swan in the UK, you know, like, so there are places that you can lodge complaints. So if you're in the UK, you know, there's a lot of, you can definitely get a place to lodge. We shouldn't be silent about it. If it happens, just lodge a complaint and then it will be investigated. And then, you know, there are appropriate actions will be taken. Okay. Yeah, that's what I can say. I don't know about what's happening in Ghana, but here definitely just lodge a complaint and then the appropriate action would be taken. There's so many people fighting it now. And so if it's genuine and an investigation goes on, you know, actions will be taken. That's what I
I should say, I have serious concerns with, I think, this one personally.
You do?
Like,
Oh,
do
no.
let me just. So basically, going back to the experience I shared, I did actually reach out to them, share the experience, and the response was something along the lines of, you know, it's different funding bodies have their own rules and regulations. So if your funding body doesn't fund PhDs, you know, but then I'm doing my PhD in your institution and you're displaying Athena Swan, so you're, you know, wash your hands off and say there's some funding bodies that support PhDs when they have time off for, you know, childbirth, but there's some funders that don't. And so if your funding body doesn't, what about the university? You know, so I seriously feel it's one of those tick box exercises. So if anyone is part of the Athena Swan chat and you're listening to this, you can get in touch because I have a lot to say about
And
your
Angela, just to speak to the point you are making, that's the thing with most of and this is not to call anyone out, but to almost speak to the reality that's on the ground, right? There's such a huge gap between policy and what is actually going on, right? When you go to these institutions, there's on paper, there's a great step-by-step, you do this, but then you ask yourself, when as an intern or a young lady who's on probation and faced with, let's say, an incident of sexual harassment, any type thing, right? And I don't feel confident enough to confront whoever it is, and I have to report. When I do report, what happens? Because there's also that thing, and actually there's a history of victim blaming. And you know, each time we talk about these things, we really do need to acknowledge the power dynamics at play, right? And so all of these things really important. What I will say though is that for every young woman here, your voice is valid. It is actually the most powerful tool that you've got. And most of the time, these quote unquote predators, they are actually cowards. So the moment that you speak up, right? You look them in the face and say, look, this is not on. I'd say 8 out of 10 times, you'll get an apology. And this goes back to the experience that I shared about the recent happening, right? A younger me would have just gone off on the phone. But thank God for grace. Thank God for grace and
maturity.
And maturity. Yes, that's the word, and maturity. I thought, look, this seems like a genuine, and you see, some of our young men, they honestly do not know better. They've grown up and they are steeped in the patriarchy, that they think that saying something like that is a joke, right? And so sometimes and unfortunately, the onus sometimes rests on us to say that, look, it's not on. Unfortunately, too, sometimes you almost have to make the example of, would you say this? Would you say this to your mother? Would you say this to your sister? Before they get it. It doesn't have to come to that, but unfortunately, for some of them, that is what it takes. And I think it was Araba that made that point, that the culture, the religion, and so unfortunately, some don't know any better. In those instances, I'd say use your voice. It's really powerful. It comes with practice. So practice with your aunties and your uncles, your aunties and your uncles at home. If they need somebody to wipe the table and there's a male and a female sat there and they decide to choose you, the female, well, hang on, why didn't you ask him? Ask him. Start practicing to use your voice like that. That way, when you step out into the workplace, you would have built your confidence. That's how I did it. I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, I would add on to that, because I wanted to
That's
say
perfect.
that point on every point of my life where I've actually had to receive that. It was because I didn't have the fear of losing that job. So I think that a lot of us that happen to be like the guy, we find it very hard to get that job. So we will try to beat down our practices and activities just not to lose it. But I had a support where I could actually tell my parent that this was what was going on. And so if for any minute I come home saying that I have been fired, then that means that I called it out. And I actually did call it out. And you see, with those people, just like Aurelia was saying, the moment you say it to their face and you don't beat about the bush, or you just don't, oh, I don't like that, like trying to be like, you don't like it, but really to them, they feel like, okay, she's saying she doesn't like it, but on a subtle note, she likes it. So I'm going to push forward. You come out very straight. I know this and this is what you're doing, and I don't like it. Don't bring it out on me. The next moment, you're gonna nickname you. You are a tomboy or something. You don't feel like that. You don't have to let these kind of comments get to you, because at the same time, they're just trying to bring you down. You're not playing let loose so that, they can have you. And at the end of the day, trust me, when they see you are upright and straight about it, they are not going to come to you. The next moment you see that the tone of their language towards what you have to do will change. And obviously they're going to get ways or maybe to sack you or something. Know the value that you have, know the worth that you have, not to stoop it's so low to actually have to undergo certain sexual advances and actually be comfortable with it, to actually stay in the place like that. Yeah.
Hepsi, just before you take this back, there's an example that I thought of, just related to something someone said earlier. When we talk about the societal changes and the cultural mindset that we still have to change. So there's a friend of mine who finished her master's about 5 years ago, and she could have gone on, because around the time she was working on getting a PhD, and I think few people around her spoke to her about the fact that she might not get a husband if she continued pursuing for a PhD. So she stopped, because she didn't want to finish and not get a husband. 5 years down the line, she has no husband, she's not got a PhD, and now she's looking to do a PhD. Okay, so these are some of the stuff as women we face. These were people, her mom, her sisters were all like, oh, no, doing a PhD, if you do a PhD, you're not going to get a husband. So, she decided not to focus on that and then wait for a husband. 5 years down the line, and I've heard people, apart from her, I've heard people, even people in my network, say things like, oh, okay, if this person is looking for a husband, then she shouldn't go on to study. I'm like, why should you have to choose between? Can you not do the PhD and get married? Can you not find a husband and still study? But these are things, we have to deal with as women. My friend wanted to do a PhD, but she had to sacrifice that because, society thinks that if you study and you become a book long, then you will not be submissive to your husband. And, these are things that
I agree with you, Araba, 100%. I agree with you because I think in a week I get to speak to almost about 3 or 4 people why it's the right thing and they should feel confident about it to get it. So I think that I wanted to even have a session where women who have had to juggle up family and scholarship and like PhD to talk the real facts on the ground and tell them, and tell them the reality, why they should go for it. And because there are a lot of thinking, like things I get to hear in a day concerning people who want to go to PhD, their boyfriend's not agreeing, they having to say, I'll do it next year, they don't happen to do it again, and all the back and forth. I think it's a conversation that needs to be tackled. If they want to, because there are a lot of people, tons of people who want to do it, but because of these vices, they don't want to go into it. Yeah.
Even when completely
sorry.
No, go for it.
Yes, even when I was doing my PhD and I was traveling, because of a project I was working on, I had people who would call me and ask me, because my husband had to take care of my daughter, why are you doing this? Why are you leaving your child? And is the PhD more important to your child? Even when my husband had agreed and was taking care of my child, I had people calling me and criticizing me for having to travel and leave my child with my husband, so conversations we should definitely have. We should have.
Really, Keisha, your point.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think it relates back to what we were speaking about how do we make sure that the males in our lives feel like they're not being left behind, that they're being supported. And there comes in that whole other thing of like, oh, successful females intimidate me, or I don't feel like I'm at their level, so I shouldn't. It just really, I do think someone needs to address the fact that males have an opinion in this, and I think it needs to be a group of supportive males that kind of like aid that, because obviously we don't know the exact emotions that they're feeling at this point. It's tough, and I'm sure it is tough, but again, coming back to the home, like making sure that like the brothers support their sisters and vice versa. I'm personally a traditionalist, and I think that it's important to also understand that the personality woman has at work is not the personality that they have at home. Sometimes they're two completely different people. My friends always laugh, I'm the clumsiest person at home, but no one would ever think that while I'm at work, So it's just, I think there needs to be that kind of separation in the minds of people that are supporting in their lives, and understanding that it does take a village, and if that village is pushing back on the goals and dreams, that it will affect the girl. But it's tough. It is tough.
Okay, so we only have 5 minutes to the end of this session. Thank you all so much to all the panelists and attendees for staying on the call. Go for 2 hours, interesting conversations, lots to take away. And hopefully we can all challenge the status quo in the corners that we find ourselves. The last comment, I didn't want to leave Sandra's comment out because I think it's quite important as to any advice for women hoping to relaunch their academic or professional lives after years of sitting on the sidelines and giving all the attention to raising children. So in the interest of time, Sandra, I'm not sure geographically where you are based. You do go through different phases, and you do get to a point where you have to make choices. I'm not actively in the lab anymore because weighing out the pros and the cons of being an employee and having to, one, as you know, as I've already said, I didn't really enjoy my PhD experience, right? And so I had to make the decision, and I chose not to pursue active research just because I can't bring my lab home, and I wanted that flexibility to be in control of my own time. So when I left research, I went into education. I thought, schools, when my kids are at school, I'll be teaching. When they're off school, then I'll also be at home. Oh my gosh, that is the most unflexible environment I ever worked in. Never again. So I did what I thought would work best for me and went into business. And obviously, one of the questions we had was whether there was a case of promoting female entrepreneurship, because that has been, I call it the silver lining for me, but I had so many options available to me. I've tried so many career sectors. You know, I've done science, media, and writing. I've done research. I've done you know, science engagement, and in trying different things, I found my place, and I thrive in my business phase, and I very confidently and proudly would present myself as a female entrepreneur. And it just gives me the balance that I've always been looking for. So, you know, still have an income, be in control of my time, and be a role model, you know, my 2 young girls, and yeah, just define your future and live the life that you want to live. So are there programs out there for females looking to relaunch their academic careers? Yes, there. I know of one particularly. There's a fellowship you can get back into the workplace. The name has escaped me, so if anyone is aware of that, please do chip in with that. I'm not sure what programs are available in Ghana, but you know, I'm a champion of female entrepreneurship. So if it's something you want to have a conversations about, by all reach out, and we can see not just entrepreneurship, you know, whatever your profession is, how we can get you back into the sector that you want to relaunch yourself in. So we have 4 minutes if anyone wants to share on this subject, you know, rediscovering yourself. If you know, went through different phases and you had to start your career again, how do you go about it without losing confidence, without feeling like I've lost all my knowledge, and still be able to have the best of both?
If I may, and I'm going to assume a lot here, because Sandra talks about a hiatus because of raising children. I'm going to assume that you're married. And for me, I'd say one of the first things that you need to do is to bring your husband on board. The two of you need to sit down and have that conversation that this is what I want to do, this is what it's going to take. Because the fact that you're ready to go out, whether it's to school or start a business, whatever it is you want to do, it means that that childcare gap which you previously were filling is going to be empty. And so you need to decide, right, how are we going to work our way around childcare responsibilities? Are you going to be more involved now, or do we have the resources to get paid help? Now, beyond childcare arrangements, I think one of the reasons you really need to bring him on board is that, like Angela has shared, even in entrepreneurship, and I always say that it's one of the most precarious sectors. It almost brings that illusion of flexibility, but then you realize your work and your family time is almost blurred out. So you are in work mode 24/7, right? Whereas those who are doing an 8 to 5 would probably switch off at 5 because they are home now. But now your home is your work, and vice versa. You also need to have that conversation about how he can help you to do whatever it is that you want to do. Because the reality is, once you are married, there isn't a lot of your success as a career woman or a female entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur, will also depend on how much input, right, or how much support that you are getting from your husband. And like the female panelists have shared, you are able to go to conferences because your husband is caring for your child. And I say it's both the husband and the man's child. So in instances where people have said, oh, your husband is doing such an amazing job, you can leave your child with him. I tell them, well, it's his child too, you know, right? So that you almost need to have that discussion on that level, so that you discuss as partners. The way you've been supportive of his career, whatever he is, it's time for him to have your back, as they say it, because whatever trajectory that you're choosing, it's going to be challenging. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it is 6 o'clock, 2 hours. I am going to officially say the conversations has come to an end. A huge thank you to all our panelists. But, you know, it's been super, super, super insightful. We will make this recording public on our social media pages if anyone wants to link back. Robert, there's a message in the chat box for you, the link to your Husband Paradox book. And panelists, if anyone wants final words, please do. Otherwise, everyone is free. to jump off
Because,
the Zoom.
can I just add? I wanted to add to what Ifua just said, just with regards to your partner, your social network and all that, maybe to young people who are considering, getting married and then, who still have plans to continue with their career. Maybe usually people don't have these discussions, but perhaps you should talk about your career progression also at the beginning before you get yourself into it. You should know that you're going to get married to someone who is going to support you, so that it doesn't come as a surprise. I mean, I know there are some men who don't want their wives to work, which is fine, but it's important for you to have these conversations, okay, so that you agree on certain things. Let him understand that this is what you want to do, and if you're a researcher, you're an academic, or you're an entrepreneur, this is what the job entails, and I hope you're going to have my back, so that once you get married, these things don't become bone of contention for you. So this is to the young people. Yeah, thank you, Hepsi. I think we needed more time, but
yes, looks like the conversations must continue. We're all challenging the status quo. And so again, Lakeisha, Afua, Araba, Aurelia, Regina couldn't join us, unfortunately, but yes, if anyone wants to get in touch for any further, and Lois, so I almost forgot about Lois, anyone wants to get in touch with any of the panelists, I'm sure you all wouldn't mind if people have a lot of questions personally for you. Social media mentoring, we'll call it. You can reach out via GH Scientific. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well at GH Scientific, and we'll be happy to put you in touch with anyone else that you'd want to have follow-on conversations with, or answer any further questions you may have, or any resources that perhaps you are hoping to get your hands on. So have a good evening. International Women's Day is officially tomorrow, and let's all choose to challenge the status quo. Good night and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Hepsi.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Haifa. Thanks, Lois. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Tom and Lakeisha. Okay, I think we can end the Zoom now.